Jackson Cole stood still in the middle of the grand hall, his eyes scanning the sea of foreign diplomats and high-ranking officers. It was an event meant for peace, a gathering of species from across the galaxy to settle disputes, sign agreements, and avoid war. He wasn't supposed to be here. The human race, despite being young in the galactic community, was respected, but there were still people who looked at Jackson like he didn't belong. But Jackson wasn't here for politics. He was here because of her. Princess Zeloria of Voronus. Beautiful, intelligent, and trouble. Jackson had been assigned as her personal guard, one of the highest honors anyone could receive. And yet, every part of him wanted to turn it down. It wasn't that he disliked her, but it was clear that being near her would be a test of his patience. Jackson Cole, right? A voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to face a tall, sleek alien with blue skin and glowing yellow eyes. The alien's name was Ivra, an ambassador from a distant system. "Yeah, that's me," Jackson replied, shaking his hand. He nodded toward the other side of the hall. "I take it, you've heard of the princess?" Ivra grinned. "Everyone in the galaxy has heard of Princess Zeloria. She's beautiful, intelligent, and impossible to keep track of. The last guard they assigned her ended up losing his job after she disappeared during a meeting. They say she's an expert at slipping away unnoticed." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure she's not that bad." Ivra's grin widened. "You'll see soon enough." Before Jackson could respond, he felt a presence behind him. He turned around just in time to see the princess enter the hall, gliding in with grace that almost made the entire room stop to watch her. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the lights, and her dark eyes scanned the crowd, glowing with an inner power. She wore a long, flowing gown made of shimmering material, a strange, iridescent fabric that seemed to change colors with every step she took. Her long hair cascaded down her back like liquid starlight, and her posture was one of confidence, even arrogance. And then her eyes locked on Jackson. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Her lips curved into a smile, a knowing, mischievous smile. It was clear she was enjoying the effect she had on him. "Jackson Cole," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, laced with an accent that was both strange and enchanting. "I've heard so much about you." Jackson could feel the eyes of the room turn toward them. He straightened his posture and gave her a polite nod. "Your Highness." But she didn't stop there. She stepped closer, her presence commanding attention as she placed a delicate hand on his arm. "Please, no need for formalities. You're my bodyguard after all," she said, her voice low and teasing. Jackson fought the urge to pull back. He wasn't used to being so close to someone with such an intense presence. He'd been assigned to protect the princess, not to stand awkwardly in her shadow. "Well, I'm glad to meet you, Your Highness," Jackson replied, his voice firm. "I'll be keeping an eye on you at all times." Zeloria's eyes twinkled with amusement. "An eye on me, you say?" She took a step back, studying him like he was the most fascinating thing in the room. "I think you'll find I'm quite difficult to keep an eye on." Before Jackson could respond, she was already moving past him, disappearing into the crowd with a graceful sweep of her gown. Hours later, Jackson's patience was already being tested. He had spent the entire evening keeping track of Princess Zeloria, making sure she didn't wander off, as was her habit. She was always close, always within his line of sight, but she seemed to find ways of slipping away every time he turned his back. "Where did she go?" Jackson muttered to himself as he scanned the room again. He had just seen her near the balcony, but now she was nowhere to be found. He knew this was going to be harder than he thought. The event was nearing its end, and delegates were beginning to leave. As Jackson was about to give up and head toward the exit himself, a soft giggle caught his attention. He turned, heart racing for a moment, but saw nothing. It wasn't the giggle that startled him. It was the unmistakable feeling that someone was watching him. He spun around just in time to see Zeloria slipping out of a side door that led into the darkened hallway. Not again, he groaned under his breath. Jackson pushed through the door, his boots echoing in the silence as he hurried down the hallway, following her trail. He could see the faint glow of her silvery hair disappearing around the corner. He rounded the corner and caught sight of her just ahead, walking with an unhurried pace as if she had all the time in the universe. "Your Highness," Jackson called, trying to keep his voice calm and authoritative. She stopped and turned around, her expression playful. "You were looking for me, Jackson?" "I was," he said, trying to keep his composure. "You're supposed to stay in the main hall. You're making my job more difficult." Zeloria's eyes sparkled with mischief. "You're not having fun? I thought bodyguards enjoyed the chase." Jackson was ready to give her a stern lecture, but instead, he found himself caught in her gaze. For a moment, it was as though the entire universe had shrunk down to just the two of them in that hallway. He felt both irritated and strangely intrigued. He had been trained for this, trained to remain professional in the face of danger, stress, and difficult situations. But this was different. She was different. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his focus. "This isn't a game, Princess. I'm here to make sure you stay safe, and running off like this doesn't help anyone." Zeloria stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "I'm not a child, Jackson. I can take care of myself. I just like testing you." She smiled, as she reached up to gently touch his chest, her fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "Besides, I think you enjoy it too." Jackson stepped back, startled by the electric sensation her touch left behind. "I'm just doing my job," he muttered, trying to ignore the heat creeping up his neck. "Oh, I know," she replied, her voice dripping with charm. "But I think I could make your job more interesting." Before Jackson could respond, she slipped away again, this time disappearing into a room nearby. Jackson stood there for a moment, trying to compose himself. He couldn't deny the strange pull she had on him. He was her protector. But part of him was starting to wonder if he was the one who needed protecting. As he stood outside the room, wondering what he was supposed to do next, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The princess was more than a royal to be guarded. She was a puzzle, one that he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. The days after the gala felt like a blur. Jackson had hoped for a bit of peace after the event, but instead, the tension seemed to build. He found himself always looking over his shoulder, scanning every corner of the station, expecting Princess Zeloria to disappear again. She always did, just when he least expected it. No matter how closely he watched her, no matter how many times he warned her, she found a way to escape. She was clever, far more clever than anyone could have anticipated. Each time she slipped away, it wasn't out of fear, it was out of boredom, or simply the need to test how far she could push him. Today was no different. Jackson was waiting by the windows of the security control room, watching the bustling station outside. The towering spires of Galathar 7 glittered under the stars, and diplomats from various worlds were moving in and out. But all he could think about was the princess. "I swear, I'm going to need a new pair of boots by the end of this week," Jackson muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the hallway once more. Zeloria had vanished again, and he'd been searching for her for almost an hour. Every time he thought he knew where she was, she turned up somewhere else, always with that mischievous smile on her face, always teasing him. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. A young officer, Nara, stood in the doorway. She had been assigned to help Jackson with security details. Nara was smart and efficient, but today, her expression was worried. "Jackson, we've got a problem," Nara said, her tone serious. "The mercenaries have moved in. They're getting closer to the station." Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. Mercenaries weren't new to Galathar 7, but their presence was always a danger. If they were after the princess, things could escalate quickly. He stood up, adjusting his uniform. "What's the plan?" Nara's eyes flickered nervously. "We're trying to get the princess into a safe room, but the last time we saw her, she wasn't in her quarters." "I know where she is," Jackson said, his voice firm. He could already guess where Zaloria had gone. She liked to disappear into the gardens when things got too hectic. She didn't like being confined, and Jackson couldn't blame her. He had seen the way her eyes would glaze over when she was forced into a room for too long. "I'll go after her," Jackson said. "You make sure the security team locks down the perimeter. The mercenaries can't get in here." Nara nodded, and Jackson moved quickly, weaving through the hallways with purpose. His mind raced. He had to get to Zaloria before the mercenaries did. The princess might be able to protect herself, but she wasn't invincible. It didn't take long for him to find her. The garden was quiet, peaceful even, with soft moonlight filtering through the artificial trees. The scent of alien flowers filled the air, and for a moment, Jackson forgot about the dangers lurking outside the station. He had almost convinced himself that everything was going to be fine when he heard her voice. "Jackson, you're late." Jackson didn't have to look around to know she was standing by the fountain, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of the lights. He walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. "I wasn't late. I was busy," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Zaloria turned to face him, her silver-blue skin shimmering like starlight in the darkness. Her eyes were full of mischief, and for a second, Jackson almost forgot why he was here. The last time he had spoken to her, it had been all jokes and flirtation. But this time, her expression was different, serious, almost troubled. "I've been hearing things, Jackson," she said quietly. "There are rumors about the mercenaries. They've been hired to take me." Jackson stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I know. That's why we need to get you somewhere safe. You shouldn't be out here." She didn't move, though. Instead, she just stood there, looking at him with that same strange intensity. "You don't understand, do you?" Jackson blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Zaloria sighed, the sound almost like a whisper in the breeze. "I'm not just a princess, Jackson. I'm a symbol. I've been trained to lead my people, to make decisions that will change the future of my planet. But all I ever do is follow orders, stay inside the palace, wear the crown, and act the way everyone expects me to. And now they want me to be a target for the whole galaxy." Jackson's chest tightened. For the first time, he saw the cracks in her confident, playful exterior. She was more than just a rebellious princess or an alien beauty. She was someone caught between duty and her own desires. "I don't want to be a symbol, Jackson," Zaloria continued. "I want to make my own choices. I want to be free." Jackson could hear the raw emotion in her voice. He'd known she wasn't as carefree as she appeared, but hearing her say it out loud, he didn't know what to do with it. "You can't just run away from everything," he said softly. "Your people depend on you." Zaloria looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "And what about you, Jackson? Who do you depend on?" "Nine." He was taken aback. It was as if she had flipped the question back on him, and for the first time, he didn't have an answer. He had spent his life following orders, keeping people safe, keeping a distance from his emotions. And yet this princess, this one alien, had him second-guessing everything. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, a sudden blast echoed through the station, followed by the unmistakable sound of alarms. The lights flickered, and a voice came over the intercom. "Attention, all personnel. The station has been breached. Mercenaries are on board. All non-essential personnel are to report to designated shelters immediately." Zaloria's eyes widened. "They're here." Jackson grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the nearby emergency exit. "We need to go. Now." They ran through the darkened halls, the sound of footsteps and distant voices growing louder. Jackson kept his grip on her, guiding her through the twisting corridors of the station. They passed empty rooms, closed doors, and hidden passageways, places only a few knew about. He knew the station well. But Zeloria didn't. She stumbled once, and Jackson caught her, his hand steady on her back. "Stay with me," he ordered, his voice hard. She nodded, though her face was tense with fear. "I'm not afraid, Jackson. I don't want to be controlled anymore." Jackson didn't know how to respond to that. He was a soldier, and soldiers were taught to follow orders. But this was different. This was a person he had started to care about, a person he couldn't just protect from a distance. They were in this together, whether he liked it or not. As they reached the safe room, the door slid open, and Jackson pushed her inside. He closed it behind them, sealing them away from the chaos outside. Zeloria looked at him, her expression softening. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Jackson didn't say anything. He simply nodded. For a moment, they stood in silence, both of them listening to the alarms, the distant sounds of mercenaries trying to breach the station. But in that moment, it wasn't the danger that mattered. It was the feeling between them. Something stronger than duty. Something deeper. The station had descended into chaos. Jackson Cole stood by the safe room door, his senses sharp, listening to the distant sounds of alarm sirens. The mercenaries were still on the move, searching every hallway, every room. His hand gripped the control panel beside the door, ready to lock it down again if needed. But he had no idea how long the safety measures would hold. Inside the safe room, Princess Zeloria paced back and forth. Her silver-blue skin shimmered under the dim emergency lights, but her face showed a rare emotion: concern. Jackson could see the tension in her movements, the way she clenched her hands as she walked. "I never wanted this," she said quietly, breaking the silence. She didn't turn to face him immediately, but Jackson could hear the vulnerability in her voice. He glanced at her, standing stiffly by the door. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone low but firm. "You didn't ask for mercenaries to come after you. I know that." Zeloria stopped pacing, her eyes meeting his. "Not the mercenaries, Jackson. I never wanted any of this. The title, the responsibility, all the pressure that comes with being a princess." Jackson felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "But you're a leader," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "You were born into this. Your people need you." Zeloria shook her head. "My people don't need a puppet. They need someone who understands them. Someone who doesn't have to play games with politics and alliances. I've spent my whole life being controlled, and now I'm forced to hide while mercenaries hunt me down. Is this what my people want?" Jackson opened his mouth to answer, but he couldn't. She wasn't wrong. Her royal position had put her in a cage. No matter how free she looked, no matter how confident she seemed, Zeloria had always been a pawn in the hands of others. The station's security systems had gone into lockdown, cutting off most of the station's access points. But Jackson knew that even with the lockdown in place, they were not completely safe. The mercenaries were clever, and if they had reached this far, they wouldn't stop until they got what they came for. "Listen," Jackson said, his voice a little softer now. "I know this situation is far from ideal, but we need to stick together. You're not alone in this." Zeloria met his gaze, her eyes softening for a brief moment. She had heard those words from countless others, but hearing them from Jackson felt different. She nodded, though the worry never left her face. She turned to the small comm system on the wall, tapping it lightly. "Jackson, we can't hide forever. We need to find a way to stop this before it escalates." Jackson's mind raced. The mercenaries could be anywhere by now. But there was one thing he knew for certain: they wouldn't leave the station without her. He didn't need to be a genius to figure out that the mercenaries were trying to use her as leverage. There was only one way to turn the tables on them. "We'll have to make a stand," he said. Zeloria raised an eyebrow. A stand? You're suggesting we fight back? I'm suggesting we outsmart them, Jackson replied. You're not just any princess. You're one of the most important figures in the galaxy. Your people won't let you go without a fight. But you can't stay locked up in here. We need to get to the control room. From there, we can take back control of the station and send a message to the mercenaries. Zeloria hesitated, looking at him as if she were trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. All right, let's do it. The corridor outside the safe room was eerily silent, but Jackson knew better than to think it was clear. They had to move carefully. He led the way, his eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of danger. Zeloria followed closely behind him, her posture rigid, her face set in determination. Jackson could see the fire in her eyes, a fire that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just running from her past anymore. She was ready to take charge of her future. They passed through the narrow halls, moving quickly but quietly. Every corner, every door, was a potential hiding place for the mercenaries. But it wasn't just the mercenaries they had to worry about. The station was built with so many layers of security, with so many hidden passages, that it was easy to get lost or trapped. I never thought I'd be sneaking around like this, Zeloria whispered as they approached a corner. I've been in these halls 100 times, but now they feel different. Jackson didn't respond. He couldn't afford to let his guard down now. They reached the main control room door, and Jackson paused, motioning for Zeloria to stand back. His hand hovered over the keypad. But before he could enter the code, the door slid open on its own. A voice crackled over the intercom. Jackson Cole, you're not as clever as you think. Jackson stiffened, his eyes narrowing. The voice was one he recognized. Captain Vorn, the leader of the mercenaries who had infiltrated the station. Vorn was dangerous, and he was playing a game of his own. I know you're there, Cole, Vorn continued, his voice cold and mocking. And I know you're trying to protect the princess. But you can't hide forever. Vorn. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. He was running out of time. If they didn't act fast, the mercenaries would corner them. And this time, there would be no escape. Princess Zeloria, Vorn said, his tone shifting to one of false sympathy. Your people have abandoned you. No one will save you. It's time to give up. Zeloria's face hardened, her eyes filled with determination. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice steady. I may be trapped in this position, but I am not powerless. She stepped forward, standing beside Jackson. Let's end this. Jackson looked at her, surprised by the strength in her voice. You're sure about this? She nodded. Without wasting another moment, Jackson entered the code into the control panel. The room lit up, and the systems inside came alive. Jackson accessed the central communications hub and initiated a station-wide transmission. Listen up, mercenaries, Jackson's voice rang out through the intercom. You're outnumbered, and you're outclassed. You will not take the princess. If you want to leave this station alive, I suggest you surrender. There was a long pause. Then, Captain Vorn's voice came through, colder than ever. You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Jackson replied. And it's over. He ended the transmission, locking the station's security systems in place. The mercenaries were trapped. The station's emergency protocol would send out a distress signal to the Galactic Protectorate, and reinforcements would be on their way. As the room fell silent, Zeloria turned to Jackson, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I didn't think you had it in you. Jackson shrugged, though there was a glimmer of pride in his eyes. Neither did I. For the first time in days, the tension between them eased. They had done it. Together. I guess this is the part where I thank you again, Zeloria said softly. You didn't just protect me, Jackson. You helped me find my strength. Jackson smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in days. Zeloria's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the future seemed wide open to both of them. Whatever came next, they would face it together.